Really great to have you here on the show. I already know you like the back of my hand now since we done hung out so many times. But if you don't mind introducing yourself to the audience, and then just a little bit that you do right now, and then we can just jump inside like the nitty gritty of what we're gonna talk about.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Crash Barbosa. My pronouns are he, him. I live in Los Angeles, California. I'm disabled. I'm formerly incarcerated. I'm currently on probation. So there's a technicality there, kind of, but yes. And, I do work with a lot of different nonprofits, political action committees, special interest groups. I work on legislation. I do as much lobbying as I can. And I'm as active in community as I can be because I'm an abolitionist. And when I'm as an abolitionist, I'm an intersectional abolitionist. And we can get into that at some point,
Yeah,
but I don't need to give that whole definition.
right. No problem at all. So I'm super excited just to talk with you and share all the knowledge that you have because I know it's just overflowing, both interpersonal and like academic as well. Um, and I just wanted to discuss like pretty much the 13th Amendment in and of itself and how the transition over from African Americans, Black people in bondage going over to modern day slavery, which is our prison industrial system. And lately, what I've been seeing a lot of is the leasing of prison labor and the leasing of people who are incarcerated and using their bodies and using their time in order to make money for these large corporations that we probably shop at every single day. And I just wanted to get your take on that, whether it's personal experience or even just professional experience too.
Of course. For me, I love to speak on this issue because the 13th Amendment did not, abolish slavery. All it did was give slavery a new name, which was in, punishment for a crime. You know what I mean? Which was a very subjective way to look at things and overly stereotype. And that's what they did very intentionally when they, wrote that into their little constitution, their little bill of rights. I'm still, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not even going to get into that. So yeah, the 13th Amendment comes around after the Civil War as if it's a solution, and then you start to see chain gangs instead of plantations. You start to see state-sanctioned violence become officially state-sanctioned even more so throughout the years after that. You see badges on Klansmen. You see literal like slave patrols volunteering. Like we saw that recently with ICE. Half those dudes were
Right.
volunteers. You know what I mean? Like these are bad. Like I don't want to say bad people, but these are dangerous people buying assault rifles and volunteering their time to patrol the board. Like, what are you doing, dude? So it's like
Right.
those suits now are homeland security. We see the same situation like over history with the 13th Amendment and the way that went into effect. It was immediate. Immediately, they started to build not just prisons, but asylums as well. And it's important to note how much intersectionality there was, especially at the time between like sanitariums and things like that and prisons, because both were used with for labor and for testing and for other things. And we see companies continuously do this over and over. Johnson and Johnson, Raytheon, and like so many other defense contractors that everybody sees in the store. They think it's shampoo. No, it's not. Like that's Nazi science right there. So, the 13th Amendment really brings the labor to the forefront. And it's complex because everybody thinks private prisons when they think 13th Amendment. Private prisons really aren't the main contributor to this. They're a low percentage of how this output goes on. And also there are now more minimum wage inside of a private prison, interestingly enough, but inside of a state prison, that is not the case. And in the county jail, you don't get paid at all. There's not even an upside to it outside of, cigarettes from the guards, movement, things like that. Maybe a couple of privileges. I mean, people are fighting over laundry. So, there's a privilege there and things like that. That's really the incentive though. And you see this happen, and these places couldn't run themselves. So I don't want to go too far into it without getting asked questions, but it's really another level to me. of like plantation style, especially in state prisons, especially in county jails, especially outside of anything that isn't like a white collar prison. But even there, you see Verizon, you see a lot of companies using call center guys. You know what I mean? So you see the white collar criminals still doing labor, but usually voluntarily and whatnot. The problem is these places can't run themselves. So it's exactly like,
Right.
you
Right.
know, back some back in the day ass shit. It's very strange. And the populations are disproportionately not white people, and definitely at statistics that shouldn't be matching when it comes to incarceration numbers per capita, and it comes down to percentage of, people per ethnicity, per whatever, in each capita. And then you see how many of those percentage of people are not white people, and you're like, huh? And
Exactly.
that's without even talking about sentencing.
Exactly. Like, because sentencing that's a whole nother episode. Like, you can't really like touch on sentencing without, like, an hour wouldn't even be enough to touch on sentencing and the injustice that happens within the courtroom itself. Before the courtroom, if you ask me. But another thing that I just want to like touch on is, like, you mentioned like a couple companies that already have sort of their hand inside of the pot and who profit off of prison labor. So like, what would be
Mhm.
like a prime example of like these companies and like what these workers provide for them? Like, the the normal thing that you think of is like a license plate off of a car, like, because you see that in like mass media and like cartoons and stuff like that, and like, like the person who's incarcerated pulling the lever and like making like thousands of license plates. But it goes further than that. It goes much further than that. What would be like some prime examples that you can think
Much.
of?
Patriot missiles. Those come from Raytheon under numerous subsidiaries. The main company that likes to foot the bill for Lockheed, for Boeing, for anything that's involved with missiles, very literally, is a company called Unicorn. It's like unicorn without the N at the end. And I think that's a strange name for a corporation. It's not a corporation, it's a Federal Bureau of Prison Oversight thing that just looks like a corporation. So this is directly tied into DARPA, where like I didn't check how official this was, but I mean, this is so it's interesting. It's the same way you see Calpea under an official state sanctioned entity, and then you see companies like Keefe. Like, no one hears Keefe. Keefe's lighting it up. Keefe's Commissary 101 Kings, like Secura's, they're killing the inmates with pricing and like all of that. Fire camps genuinely killing inmates for cheap, like what, $2 a day. I mean, that's frontline risk of life for what, a few months off the sentence. I mean, these are serious. This is unconscionable morally. It should be. And when we look at companies like Johnson and Johnson, when we look at the University of Pennsylvania's medical school and their little involvement with, what went down with a lot of Black inmates, out of averaging of 46 of them were Black men, and they're getting tested on with, it wasn't just the baby powder. I mean, that's the thing they got indicted on, but there's so many examples of this from Johnson and Johnson, from companies like Raytheon. I mean, like when you see, earbuds go to soldiers, when you see body armor go to soldiers, you think it gets tested on. I mean, all the way down to taser sometimes. And then, the cost of a Patriot missile by itself, that's what, $6 million roughly US or whatever. No one's paying that off with their lifetime salary, especially at what, 18 cents a day, maybe. I'm talking about really price points like that. That's not a lot of the population inside of prisons that's actually within the labor force, because it's a privilege and whatnot. It's something you can do to get your mind off of things. It's something you can do to get off of the yard, have more freedom and things like that. You also can only be like you're only able to do it if you have a certain amount of time left on your sentence, or if you're a certain type of offender. It's very programming, as you know. That's a whole
Yeah.
different episode. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that, it's part of programming. It's part of programming, so it's about that accessible. And like when you go to a county jail though, you're running the facility for these guys. I mean, that's cop cars. It's being up in the kitchen, making products that are marked not for human consumption for people to eat, and then it's no wonder we see commissary numbers jumping off the page, like on income sheets that are still covered up for companies like Kifi and subsidiaries. They have Secures and GTL are no better. Kifi is no better. They're involved in the communications and what they cut in off of that too, and the stamps and the postage. It's completely absurd. What we're seeing is like it's human capital, but it's at a deeper level now because it's like we're really going to use the human capital to run the actual business. And these
Right.
are sometimes even privately owned if they're public. So, it goes so deep. And like there's so much to cover in 1 hour. That's why I
Yeah.
was just jumping all over. But Calpia, like that's the worst. Like, everyone thinks of the DMV, they don't think of 75% of their income is from fabrics, like
Yeah.
N95 masks and you know, every flag, every piece of furniture in your local senator, in your local assembly member, in your local city hall, like those people can be woke as hell, but they're sitting on furniture and they are respecting a flag that was made by people who are incarcerated, and that is not abolition. I'm sorry, I forgot you guys are Queen Bridget on the show, but
No, we're not. Like, go ahead.
okay,
Yeah,
okay,
you're
okay,
good.
okay. I'm just trying to be in pocket. So yeah, I mean, it's deeply disturbing when I see, and I know a lot of the left comes at me for this, but I'm disturbed, frankly, when I see Feinstein, who I saw tour the county I was in when I was in county last time. I saw her touring the facility as if it was her pet project. Like it looked like she was
Yeah.
on vacation. So I mean, that's the head of the Council on Foreign Relations. These people have no social. It's like they're out there with like Governor Newsom cutting ribbons. You know what I mean? Saying like, "Oh, yeah, we're gonna do all this, and you know, we're gonna let incarceration." Meanwhile, like for real, like damn well where those flags came from. You know where your furniture came from. You know all this is happening. And then, so it's that transparent where we see it at every school. Those are Calpia flags. So
Yeah.
it's like you're walking in a college campus to learn about liberation. You're right under the oppressive flag, and the flag was oppressive without being, made by incarcerated people.
Right.
But it's it means so much more when you see it in that context. And then you walk down the shelf, you see Johnson and Johnson. Maybe you have the baby. Maybe you
Mhm.
have the shampoo. Like the moral cost of that is very high. The moral cost of shopping at Target is high. The moral cost of Verizon, the moral cost of Amazon, which we all are guilty of. You know what I mean? Like that's bad. Amazon's bad. I mean, there's a moral cost to all of this. McDonald's, there's a moral cost to having Starbucks, more than just on this level. Also, with the idea that you protect Palestine, don't buy Starbucks. Like, there's a lot to this. We're really being run by oligarchs into the ground in a very racist way, but they'll come for everybody eventually once we get to a point where they're really looking at people as more valuable inside of a cage for $80,000 a year to them,
Yeah.
upkept by incarcerated people. The whole facility, it's all upkept by everybody, the kitchen, the laundry, and then they're making pennies. Then when they make pennies, guess what happens with those pennies? They go straight back in.
Oh,
It's its own revolving door within the recidivism complex of, but it's capital that's revolving this time. It goes very in offensive. Go back to communications companies, back to healthcare services that are owned by General Electric. That's another company we see every day. We don't hear a
yeah.
lot about because they're usually bombing people, not really making home appliances anymore. So it's, Hewlett Packard, that's another one that needs to be
Yeah.
indicted. I mean, I could go on and on. There's thousands of US companies and subsidiaries and strange GTL Securas under now 3 different banners and merging. Like they're intentionally making it very, very hard to track. Keefe's still doing Keefe. They just merged with other people. So I mean, these are deep mergers that no one talks about. Bob Barker, is involved. I mean, people are involved. Like it is like people
Yeah.
that you see. Like people are watching The Price is Right. Like that didn't happen. So
And then I just wanted to get your like opinion expanding on it. Like, what is the average sort of salary or hour per rate that, someone incarcerated makes compared to what they have to pay to get like supplies that they need, food that they need, clothes that they need, and things like that. And then if like the average workers like on the outside, like how much do they make? And then even that's not fair because the cost of living, if you just think about like California, the cost of living does not equate to how much these companies pay them. So it just
Yeah,
doesn't.
yeah.
But like if you can give like just a brief sort of like comparison for them both, then that would like be a real eye opener.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the reason the companies do it in the first place is based in capital. They claim even to their shareholders that this is completely legitimate. It's completely lawful. Unfortunately, it is lawful, but they really don't get into the nitty gritty details. Some proudly do, but very few. And they use, and sometimes unknowingly, I won't lie, sometimes unknowingly, companies will use materials and whatnot from a company that's sourcing that, and they don't know. So it's all about cutting costs of labor, like it always is inside of a capitalist society. So what we see is companies try to cut costs for the shareholders. They need cheaper labor, so much cheaper that, but Target I saw was paying 25 an hour or something starting now. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but even if it's not, I know it's 18 or whatnot in California, something like that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, I mean, they're paying incarcerated people. You mean a day? I mean, like, because we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about like a day is
Mm-hmm.
not an
Yeah, you can go by a
hour,
day
not
rate.
even a third, not
Yeah.
even. So it's that bad, you know what I mean? Where it's like we're not even talking about a third of an hour at
Right.
Target doing 12 hours. So that's troubling. And then 24-hour shifts at fire camp. Maybe firefighters make, I don't even know. I'm guessing 120 around that in LA
Mm-hmm.
right now. And they were making about 110 before budget increases on public safety, like cops. So, I mean, I'm not hating on firefighters. Everybody should do them if they want to save lives. Good for y'all. But like, you know, you should be on the front lines, not the people who are incarcerated who can't have your job. That's some
Right.
fuck shit. But yeah,
Right.
you know, so that's what starts this. And like the argument that gets used by the left and there is recidivism. Nothing reduces recidivism. Prisons are violent and they're not helpful. Parole isn't helpful. Probation isn't helpful. Both forms of incarceration, too often overlooked. Electronic monitoring is as oppressive as being inside of a cage. I mean, if the thing gets unplugged, even if it doesn't, say the thing's malfunctioning, you, no one cares. Like, I can't tell you how many people I've seen come in because they're, you know, anklet ran out of battery. And like no one
Yeah.
cares about that. You just get put on a hold. And like usually you get violated for that because if you're on EM, they expect you to pay absurd amounts of money and to comply with defective machines and then dice it like that. And usually it's at double the time you would do due to aggregate release date. And that's a whole different thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
so
I didn't even know that
um
one. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So to me, it's EM is something you should check out for sure because the surveillance state and county jails relationship with big tech is getting interesting to say the
Yeah.
least. But it's getting more than Orwellian because I don't think Orwellian prophesized capitalism in 1980. Like there was no Orwell like capitalism in 1984. It seemed like it was an authoritarian, semi quasi communist type of just authoritarian regime. But like
Right.
we're talking about a country that claims the land of the free, and this is like free for who? You know what I mean? It's free labor. It's like most people who are doing the jails haven't been convicted.
Yeah.
Most never will
Yeah.
be. Most never will be. I mean, even it's just it's troubling. It's troubling. I mean, if we want to look at this on a deep lens, anybody you know who's on parole, anyone you know who's on probation, anytime they're working for free, guess what that is? It's the same thing because they're not free. They have a gun to their head. They have someone checking in. If you're on probation, you're not viewed as half out. You're viewed as half in.
Yeah.
And so it's like people don't understand that it's a whole different thing. Like you can't just go get a job if the police are gonna have more activity at that place just because you work there. You know what I mean? No one wants to hire you. You have to
Right.
disclose these things, and then it becomes a requirement or a term of release. And it's just a never-ending cesspit of financial and racist just oppression and ruin because you don't see this happening to white people. I'm the exception. I'm really not the rule, though. You know what I mean? Like, there's other exceptions, but I mean, sentencing wise, again, a whole nother episode, but what
Yeah.
you're seeing inside, like, the reason that matters here though is because of how labor works inside. Is you can only get certain jobs if you're doing enough time, and so that makes it so much. I don't know how it could be worse, but that makes it worse. Not so much more worse, because I don't know what else they're really trying to do, but it's really like when you can't think they could get weirder about something, they do it anyway. And so that's with visitation, even in fire. Like, I can't with this. You know what I mean? It's just they're not complying with their own ideas. That's what it
Right.
comes down to. And the reason they're not is due to lobbying. And this lobbying is completely legal in the state of California, unfortunately.
Yeah. Exactly. And then like even you expanding on like they're not even following their own like protocols and rules and things like that. I know you were telling me a little bit when it came to like the relationship between like county and like federal and how they get a fine for since they're purposely overpopulating, jails and prisons. And in order to get more funds and more out of it pretty much. And they'll even like
80,000 person a year.
yeah,
Yeah.
like if you have numbers and like what they do with those fines, like have at it. Cause that shook me the most.
It's hard to trace where all this money goes. They claim it goes back into these facilities. It goes to, the slush fund. I'm pretty sure it pays for, ironically, you know, incarcerated labor rate furniture when they need to upgrade at the Capitol building. That's just what it is. I mean, we see companies involved in the construction of prisons at this point using incarcerated labor. It is that serious. I mean, so to me, what we're like, the numbers are off the charts. That's what I will say. Like, within years, someone cost well over $2 million. A few years, like, at least 3 million, like, because that $80,000 number is a baseline number. That doesn't include anything else. Like, there's still rights to a degree. So it's like, if you need medical attention and you can't afford, and like, healthcare is relatively cheap. Like, if it was that cheap out here, no one would cry about Medicare for all. The problem is the difference in what people have in their accounts, unless they can rely on the support system outside. And it's important to note that they're bleeding people's families out. They're not just punishing one individual; they're punishing entire families, entire communities, and their access to being able to have any ability to care for this person the way they need to be when they get home, because the state sure as hell isn't going to.
Right.
Probation and parole are sure as hell not going to, even though that's what you're technically paying supervision fees for. So to me, like, this money all goes to mythical places, into the black book of the military industrial complex, because the two things are so intertwined. Can I trace some of it? Yeah, 100%. Of course I can. But there's no way I could trace how much they're really making off of this, because of the fact that I know counties like Ventura will happily eat like a $15,000, $20,000 a day fine to be incarcerating too many people. And like, that's not just there, that's anywhere that has people sleeping on the floor. These facilities aren't designed
Yeah.
for that shit. So it's like bunks in the middle of the hallway. Like, that wasn't designed that way. Like, so the fact that they have started to make space, right? And now they're building all these alternative care facilities that are like 8 times the size. They have Rikers Woke Edition coming in New York, apparently, if
Yeah.
Mayor Adams has his way. I mean, that's terrifying to me. Like, these are sanitariums. So there's the intersection again where they're criminalizing blackness, they're criminalizing anything that isn't useful to them. So now they're starting to intersect once again, which was kind of more of a sexist and racist thing before, with illness and things like that. They're now using it in a caring way when they criminalize mental illness, but they are not decriminalizing it. They're not
Exactly.
even destigmatizing it, let alone decriminalizing it. But so it's just, they really are still putting it into a box where, well, this person needs help. They shouldn't really be able to live independently, because we're not sure if they're capable. Does anyone ask them? No. Does anyone talk to people about that? No, because no one wants to talk about mental health. And that's why half of, not, I don't want to throw numbers out, but that's why a lot of in the first place. It's because of the police, it's because of lack of care, and it's because of the fact that the police know for a fact they can use much more violent responses when somebody is known to have mental health conditions. And this used to be used as a way to like kind of burn witches as well. You know what I mean? Like there was ways to have your wife locked up. You know, if you were tired of her, you could get her thrown in the sanitarium. Hella dudes are doing this. You know what I mean? Like in the 40s, the 50s, God knows how many dudes are doing this. Like I don't look at public records and investigate individual
Right.
weird white families, you know, but I know that was a thing in this like community watch-esque obsessed with punishment culture of late stage capitalism we're all living in is absurd to me. I don't think that will happen. I think a lot of people, whether they want to believe it or not, are obsessed with punishment. They are addicted to punishment. They are addicted to revenge, and for some ungodly reason, the media, but other reasons, they really think that police just are the solution to that. They think
Yeah.
that cages are the solution to that because it's been normalized for so many. Said anything about race until recently, and at least in white communities. No, so politicians weren't hearing that shit. So you know, it's like Angela Davis might have gotten in a couple of people's ear, but at the end of the day, that fight's going to be a long fight still,
Right.
just to get basic liberation, just to get to where Denmark's at. It's going to take my lifetime just to get there. I hope not, but like I have to prepare for that to not even happen in my lifetime as an abolitionist. So to me, it's something that we can fix, but we have to change the way we look at crime and punishment. Not to sound like I'm bringing up Russian
Yeah.
Revolution like literature, but like we really need to stop with this. It's like most people are in there for non-criminal offenses. That's the real reality. Like it's just it really gets to me to see society try to erase human beings and their problems and things. This is the part that's even more back. In doing so, somehow those problems aren't going to have ripple effects, carry over, and build up like a powder keg or just like a toxic poison from Monsanto in the soil. You know what I mean? It's like that's
Right.
really what happens at the end of it. And so when you're poisoning your own society, I don't understand how anybody could imagine that society could improve, because people are cheering this shit on as if it's a gladiator match when they see a verdict on TV, even
Right.
abolitionists, and that makes me sick. Like when I see a guilty verdict,
Uh-huh.
I see. So what? We're throwing this narrative just to Fox right now. Like they don't even have to do their job. They're just going to be like, so they only want to lock up their enemies. Like this ain't it. You know what I mean? We
Right.
can't be
Right.
calling for the incarceration of anybody. Like, is justice being served, or are they acknowledging any of it? No, it's performance art, just like every trial. I got carried away there.
No, you're chilling. I'm just all like, yeah, we're gonna need another episode for trials and sentencing. Because the more we talk about like, oh my God, there's so many details when it goes inside sentencing and what exactly is criminalization. And that's an excellent point too, because not only like abolitionists, but just people who consider themselves either like allies or consider themselves like against the prison system, or like, oh, it should be about rehabilitation and things like that. They're like so quick to be happy when someone gets incarcerated, that now that is not to justify what they did, because
No,
something
it's
should be
not at
done.
all.
Like plenty of people have done plenty of things. I'm like, well, something needs to be done. So we can't just leave you be. But it's troubling to see the
Right.
excitement in their eyes when they're going to the institution that
Yeah,
they're
that's
trying
the
to
part
tear
that.
down in the first place. And I'm just like, I
Mhm,
was like, what happened to
mhm.
getting rid of it? So
No, it is the part that messes me up the most though, is the real joy you see. You know what I mean? Like from
right,
like the verdicts. Like I mean, you'll see people in a restaurant like when a trial's on, and they'll be like, "Oh, the verdicts are coming in." It won't me that these verdicts that come in that have nothing to do with like what people believe it. Like there's still,
right,
you can still see that little look in their eye, and there you hear 20 years for count one, and they're just like, Like they get the shivers. It's like, what are you
Yeah.
watching? The Colosseum? Like we're not in Rome. Like, you know what I mean? So to me, that's dangerous. And to me, seeing companies like, honestly, I don't think we're far from that. Once I saw those video machines going up inside, like I started
Oh
to realize, like,
yeah,
how far
yeah,
away are we really from Dana White doing a deal with, JPay and, Securas and doing, actual pace did it with freestyle battles that nobody got paid for. Why the fuck would Dana White's, Coke doing racist ass make it a deal with uh, desperately trying to rebrand themselves as if anybody uses their services besides people who are incarcerated fucking JPEG. Fuck
yeah,
all that, So it's like people need to really take note of that too. It's that there's a really deep seated tie to this where like Lecrae is not only a rapper, but it's more toxic. He's an actual Christian rapper.
yeah,
Like most of his distro is paid for by the church. So we're seeing a man of God go into prisons right now and make money for a company that is doing shit Jesus would never do. And
never.
Jesus wasn't white, but he would never have done that shit, like based on any account of anybody really at that time. I don't know if Pontius Pilate would have done that shit, to be honest. Like that's where we're at now. It's like
Right.
we look at like monsters from back in the day, and it's like I don't know if they would like I feel like they were self-conscious about we're back to feudalism, and I swear to
Right.
God, it's troubling to me that people are like, "Oh, this is just new." I'm like, it's actually old.
Oh,
You know
it's
what I mean?
old.
It's really
It's
old.
just
That's why we're not
relabeled.
recognizing.
Yeah. All of it is old. It's just you just shifted the name for it pretty much. And one thing that going back towards like when it comes to um the earnings when it comes to you working while you're incarcerated. And I just wanted to get like a little expansion on when it comes to the earnings, how does a community like the tiny biosphere, or it's not even tiny since it's overpopulated, but the biosphere that is, prison or jail, and how they interact with one another, other incarcerated person to incarcerated person, and then even with some of the guards too, how is that its own sort of like economy and business? Um, and I'm like referring
Oh
to
my
like
God,
that
I'm
Twinkie
glad you
story
asked.
that you told me. I was like, I was dying for that story.
I'm glad
But
you
if you
asked.
could tell them that, like, I would love it.
That's it. Oh, okay, so like, yeah, it's like this. Without because like there's things I can't say that you would get a kick out of, but like there's people who are still doing time and I can't talk about
Yeah.
some things that took like an actual consensus to do, but like are just as petty and hilarious, but they somehow are just could get someone written up. You know what I mean? But
Right,
like
right.
we're talking about like with the hostess thing, for example, right? It's like you're paying $2, $3, or 350, I think it was, like, and you don't know, like you just know it's going to be a cake or like something. They don't give great descriptions of this. It's like,
Yeah.
hostess cupcake, hostess this, hostess that. Sometimes it will just come through as like a bear claw. That was rare. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
you get that, or you get the Twinkie, and like everyone's getting hit with the normal Twinkie all day. But like if you had like the pink one with like the snowball thing on it, like that was serious. You know what I mean? Like you could trade that for about five of anything, like worth $1. You could put that in to do all kind. You could buy into a poker game with that mother. So it was like you kept those on. Like first thing you learn is like coffee. That's the
Yeah.
economy. That's how it works. Like if commissary gets dismissed, but you want to make sure you have enough coffee to last at least 3 months of a straight up lockdown. And so that was like guards were calling me Starbucks over the motherfucking radio in there. Like I had an absurd amount of coffee and creamer. It was absurd. Like I picked up game real quick, and like guess what? Like every time it was almost commissary day, nobody was starving at that point because the one thing everyone needed was coffee. I had like 10 unopened bags. Like I had
Yeah.
like it was way over the point where like like I could have technically been. I guess we're always looking for something else when they rated our shit. So I don't know. Like I guess that, you know, these stupid like fantasies they had about tattooed guns or whatever were that never got found were much more important. Like I saw these dudes pulling banana peels out of the fucking trash, dude. They were in there for like 6 hours. Like, you know what I mean? Like they come in and they come in hot too. Like, but yeah, so that's part of it too, where like that happens at the worker dorm. It's like, you know, like these dudes will be getting back from work because, you know, they're 12-hour shifts. They'll be in the worker dorm. You guys, boom, 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 you know, and they come in like SWAT. They don't play around. Like they don't come in with, you know, live ammunition, but they don't have to. Like they
Right.
don't have to. What they come in with a military formation, less than lethal. That means hella lethal firearms, bear claws, and batons. Like they're good.
Right. Right. So that's crazy to me. Like certain things, it's the unspecified part that gets me. Like you don't know, you've already worked for so long. Say that it takes like weeks and weeks and weeks just to get you like maybe one or two cupcakes. Or like a bag of top ramen. You were explaining to me that that was like completely unfair. And then you don't know what you're getting. That, that's like a slap in the face to me.
No, you do hostess cakes, and I'm not sure if that's everywhere. That's just every. That's I think it's everywhere in California. I'm not 100 on that, but I've never seen it not be that in California.
Oh,
So
not to
hostess,
be
it's
that in
like that.
California.
But like Keithy, you know what you eat. What? Like even Keithy, like you usually know what you're getting. Like the coffee, not so much. Like it's state prison, it's different. County, when you're filling out the little like bubble sheets and shit, like they really just say premium coffee or like they don't really specify the really good one. Like you don't really know, and that becomes its own economy too. Like you get the yellow bag. No one saw the yellow bag. Like the red bag's like rare. It's not rare in LA, but it's very rare in other counties. You know, because it's better. Like than the blue bag. Everyone has the blue bag. What like the blue bag's still better than the orange bag because no one likes the orange bag. So it's like, you know, you have to
Yeah.
really like stack up on your shit and do what you do. Like it's really like, you know, if you didn't know how to hustle and barter, you did after that, you know what I mean? Because your whole life runs on, you know, you're trading a quick, you know, piece of candy, you know, for a quick bag of chips, because that's really the best access you have to food. And they, nothing there is marked for human consumption. They're feeding people straight up estrogen and, you know, men's jail. Like it's, that's what you're being fed essentially is terrible, terrible processed soy that's literally used to feed cattle that are in meat packing plants that are planned to be executed. And like that's what they're giving to people, but unless it's the bird feed oatmeal and things like that. So it's like that's what
Yeah.
they're eating, you know. It's just it's it normalized. People are that, you know, they're like, oh no, this is cool. You see, I mean, the economy goes to the point where people are trading food. Like they'll give
Yeah.
a whole tray of food or like a cake from the dessert because they're in debt for something else. And it's
Yeah.
just like, so it preys on people directly. And then that's without getting into minutes on the phone. Minutes on the phone are precious commodity. Like that might be like the diamonds and like coffee's the gold. You know what I mean? Where it's like
Yeah.
in terms of rare, like, and or maybe even like the drone element, like rare earth material, like where it's like you really need that. Like every country is about to nuke each other for it. Like that's where it really you start to see that with like haircuts as well. You know what I mean? So it's a whole interesting economy, fam. It's like to get a haircut, you think it's from a like licensed barber? It might be. It was for me because it happened to be that my bunkie was a licensed barber, but
Oh,
like, you know, like it's not usually. I just think I was in a uniquely good situation on that. And like, yeah, so that was cool. I got to like get my hair cut real quick. And when that's when they let us
yeah.
even cut our hair, whole nother story. But you know, people who there were people who went months without getting their nails clipped or their hair done because they couldn't pay tax to get further up the line. Because at the end of the day, it was politics that got you at the like
Yeah. Yeah.
haircut line, you know. And like you could be cool about it, which I always was. Most people were, but like you could only get 6 people done, and 3 if they throw you in lockdown, and that was your one day that month that y'all were realistically probably going to have a chance to be in there doing basic hygiene. And it's like there's violations just everywhere. You know what I mean? It's like there's not working mirrors. Like these things are all guaranteed under human rights, very, very clearly, and these things aren't replaced. They'll ask, like they'll go as far as to tell you to fog the windows when they
Wow.
inspect in the morning. Like that's so absurd to me. You know what I mean? It's like they'll really tell you to fog the windows. Like that's like, and if you don't, like everyone's locked down. Like no TV, no phones, nothing. Like every door closes, every door locks. Like there's no one in the day room. Like that's it. Like
Wow.
so that's the game they're really playing in there. Is like they take basic access from people who are locked in a cell between 18 and 20 hours a day. No, my bad, between 20 and 23 hours a day where I was. So it's literally like that. You couldn't do more than 4 hours a day outside of your cell unless you really tried your hardest to schedule things like so that you could and not eat into like your time with the door open, you know?
Right,
So
right, right,
that's
right.
that's just how it is. Like I was in an overpopulated, you know, high security ass thing. So it was like I got to be in the day room because I have epilepsy. So like they did it put me in just the cell room, and that's arguably better or worse. I mean, you're
Hmm.
you're sleeping with your shoes on in the fucking day room. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's just how it is. But like, I mean, it's not what's up. It's just, and you just see a lot of the pain in the families and people like who are incarcerated. But it's just, everyone's talking about their families. It's important to note that like I'd argue that families suffer as much as the people inside, if not more. It depends on
Hmm.
like the
Hmm.
relationship and the family member, but if not more, I would definitely say that. And if that isn't true, I could vouch that most people, that's what they spend their time worrying about inside. It's not them, it's like their family. Yeah, sure, it's them because it's not, you know, it's a hurt people type of environment, but they're worried about their families because, I mean, it's like you're used to being able to be there for people, and then when you're not, it's like how do I protect, you know, my mom? How do I protect my lady? You can't. You
Yeah.
don't even know if what they're saying is reality. Like they'll be telling you like what they're doing that night. It sounds like it's not even real. You know, they're like, oh yeah,
Right.
we're about to go to this spot, and it's like what? Like y'all can do that, and they're like, yeah, but and like, but you notice this is eating into their day. So over time, it eats at you. Like over time, you don't want to look at someone through bulletproof glass every like
Yeah.
time they visit, because like who wants to do that to their own mother? Like no matter, it's just yeah, it's like, and they get strip searched on the way in by the same people because it's like if most people come to put money on your books anyway. I mean, you can
Hmm.
do that online, but there's those transaction fees are absurd. I think they're like $11, something like that. Like to
Yeah.
load, you know, a quick little bit of money onto the phones or whatnot. It's like at least, you know, I think it was 10. But where I was at, Securos was on some craziness though, where they had just merged with GTO. Like they didn't like the prices that were listed weren't even the prices. They were like allowed to do this because they were still figuring it out. Like it's
Wow.
like what, you know what I mean? Like this would never be allowed outside. Like even in a private consumer market, like this wouldn't be allowed. Like this wouldn't be allowed under like the most authoritarian regime. Like Vladimir Putin might turn off Facebook, but he's not. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't even mean to sound like a Putin sympathizer because I'm not. I'm just saying, you know, leaders' jobs are to limit loss of life, and no one's doing their fucking job right now.
Right. Well, I guess, and we're about to hit time in it pretty soon. But one thing that I definitely want to get from you is, and it's like a question I even ask myself, I'm all like, well, why don't these people sue? Like whether you're inside or outside, like whether you're inside and you're like, hey, I should like write a complaint or something like that, whether you just got
Oh,
out and y'all like, oh, I'm gonna fix you, and you turn around, or if it's like the family members know and they get mad and they want to sue, like what stops them from that?
everything.
Yeah.
Everything stops them from that. I mean, okay, like if you want to start with the person who's incarcerated, what stops them from that? literal force, violent force. The guards will not play around with that. Like, if you mention too much about human rights, even if you're reading them directly from shit they're pissed you got from the law library, like, you know, Title 15 and whatnot, like, they really don't take kindly to this. They see any level, like, if you think Walmart comes down on unions, like, dude, you know what I mean? Try, like, I made the mistake one time of suggesting that nobody go to work that day into the kitchen if they don't give us our commissary. I lost, you know what I mean? Like, I got my ass beat by some guards. Like, that's what they be doing. You know what I mean? So it's like, I mean, that's regular shit. It could have been worse, bro. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like they do way worse shit. Like, when people be doing anything like that. So it's like, if you're gonna like sue them like that, dude, like, it's hard not to laugh at that. Like, if you're a rich guy, sure, like, I guess you could get like an attorney that has an
Mhm.
investigator with enough credentials to demand access to the facility, but still they have time to do all the cleanup work they have to do
Yeah.
before they open a door for some licensed like, you think they're going to open the door for an FBI agent? Hell the fuck no. They're going
No.
to schedule when that door opens and make sure it looks like Candyland, and it will never look like Candyland, but like 60 days in isn't jail. You know what I mean? It's just like, unless somebody's in like a PC tank or something, and like, I don't know, like, I think that's a different thing. It's just different. You know what I mean? It's like, there's a lot more tension and things like that going on. There's a lot more stressing about money. I mean, you know, people ironically don't steal. Like, you can't steal. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Mhm.
like, if you do, it's like, that's really bad. I mean, good luck. You know, but it's like, that's really how that goes. And it's like, you see things happen in society, and like, I feel like, as somebody who's been incarcerated, I always wonder, I'm like, how is it that, like, things that are not tolerated there are so openly tolerated here? Like, this
Yeah.
is strange to me that this is considered the civilization that everybody's like, this isn't, you know, it's civil, but whatever. And so, but getting back though to, you know, uh yeah, sorry, I veered off of that, but the families cannot sue for the same reason. Barriers like that. Guards take time off. They do this very strategically. So, if, say, it was a complaint against the guard, I mean, that could get taken seriously. Not if it was at a county facility, because then it's a sheriff. No sheriff gets indicted. That's just how it works. It's the same way as, like, if a sheriff gets out of the car, someone's going to jail. They don't care who. Same thing
Yeah.
with, like, you know, being a sheriff. Like, you ain't getting in trouble for shit. Look at Paco. Look at, like, these are the main ones. Like, imagine what the dudes who aren't on TV get away with. So it's like, I mean, yeah, they're doing that. They're covering everything up. The family, the barrier is finances if they were able to. But I'm saying, like, even Bernie Madoff's ass getting locked up without frozen assets or anything, I would have a very, very difficult time having a case brought in front of the Supreme Court about anything related to his human rights, unless it was something that he had a whistleblower on. And that's
Yeah.
just sadly true. But these
And
places won't be accountable without a whistleblower, and they never are. You see it over and over. You see every, you know, company, you see every facility deny until someone blows a fucking whistle every single time. And then once someone blows the whistle on one thing, it's everything that
yeah.
comes out. You know what I mean? Unless it's a well strategic city, like LA is very good with their corruption. They move it off site. You know what I mean? They'll move it to Ventura County if they don't want a public trial. They'll do a what LA is very good at avoiding all of this scrutiny. Like Twin Towers, when I was in there during like Occupy towards the end of that, like, I wasn't there for Occupy. I didn't support that. I thought people were wasting their time. They could have waited in line at banks and really made the system listen, but they didn't do that. So it's like, during like Occupy, it was really like, for me, I just happened to be arrested around the time that everyone was getting rounded up. So the courts were clogged, and it was just like, in Twin Towers, I saw a guard coming back on duty, and like, I really thought this was a joke, dude. I'm not fucking kidding. Like, that first day there, I see this dude walk in, and I
Mhm.
notice his last name, and I'm like, no way, is that the deputy that I just read about beating an FBI agent? Not an informant, an agent who was undercover as an incarcerated person to death, because he caught him filming him beating another incarcerated person with the cell phone that he had been issued by the FBI inside. What he didn't know when he beat this dude to death was that that cell phone, after he smashed it, still recorded because they prepared for things like that. In my opinion, putting the agent's life at that much risk is a weird level of prep to take. Like they had
Yeah.
something ready to go if it was broken in half, but they had it all on cameras. The feds wanted to do something about that. You know what they did about it? And this guy murdered somebody. Like this happened. He murdered somebody, and the other guy was in a coma. I don't know how bad it ended up for him. I doubt he's okay. I doubt he has like working limbs and shit.
Right.
And this dude, he was on administrative paid leave for like, I don't know how long. I'd say a couple months, a few months, and he
Oh,
was in there on his best behavior, saying what up to everyone. And I'm like, there's no way it's the same guy. And I thought everyone was kidding until I realized I
that's the
asked him,
same
and he was
guy.
like, yeah. He just straight said it. He just straight said it. He's like, "Oh yeah, I did that." He's like,
Wow.
you know, his excuses. I didn't know he was the FBI. I was like, wait, so you're saying like you just be doing that? And he's like, well, I mean, obviously not anymore. You know, and
Hmm.
it's like
But
my
at
bad,
some
dude.
point, you saw that as okay. So, which is
No, no,
so
not some point.
concerning.
A month or two ago, a month or two ago,
Yes.
and now you're back here just fist fist bumping with like other, and I was just like, oh no, you know what I mean?
Mm-mm.
Like people are, and like I won't lie, like I wouldn't have believed it. Like if I didn't know it was him, like it would have been the last guy I thought. That's the scary part. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like I would say he was like the only dude that probably ever called me by my name in like 4 months that time, like maybe six. I don't know. I was there for like, yeah, about six that time, which is weird because I wasn't charged with anything. That's a whole different story. I
Yeah.
wasn't even charged, let alone like, you know, not tried yet. No, not even charged. Like, there were no official formal charges. I was just there, lost in the system. They weren't sure what I was doing there. It was just very strange. So that's how overpopulated we're looking at with Twin Towers. It's the city. You know, you can get lost in there. Like you really can. It's like walking around pretty much with free reign. I mean, it's real. So, I mean, I could get incoming calls there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure Secura's fixed that when they found out about it, but I got incoming calls because one of our payphones, like, it could take incoming calls. So it would be like someone could call and be like, yeah, it's for Crash. And they'd be like, yo, Crash. Like, and like, you boom, phone. You know what I mean? Like, that was how it was. No one was paying GTL, no one was paying
Right.
Secura. I was like, we had one phone that did that or whatever. I'm sure they fixed this issue
They took it out
quickly,
now.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
Man, that's crazy. Well, we're pretty much time right now, but I just wanted to give like an opportunity for like any lasting remarks that you wanted to say. Of course we're gonna have you back on the show because I think it would be an injustice not to cover like something like sentencing. Um, and also how does like parole and probation affect people and their families. But any like lasting remarks that you wanted to say, any like current events that's happening that you're like, hey, you should like keep your eye on this if you're interested in learning more about this, and just giving you the
Yeah,
floor for the remainder of the time that we got.
yeah, of course. Like I love this. And thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to come on. Like you're the homie and everything. So obviously, you know, but like either way, like I'm always happy to talk about this and educate people however I can. I mean, the best thing right now for people to be keeping an eye on is definitely still prisons and still cops and still like Mayor Adams in New York is really setting a lot of democratic precedents. Like that's a very well intentioned propaganda thing where like whatever goes in New York, the DNC is looking at it as if they can get away with it in New York, we can push it on LA, we can push it on San
Yeah.
Francisco. That's a very literal thing that's happening right now. And unfortunately, activists are meeting with this guy. So that's what
Yeah.
it is. And I think everyone needs to pay attention to that right now as far as incarceration goes. As far as how people can learn more about it, I mean, there's a wealth of resources. I, of course, always recommend Initiate Justice as my go to,
Yeah.
like, because I love Initiate Justice, fam. But, you know, it's like, there's plenty. I mean, people can get involved in their own community, but if they anyone goes on, you know, initiatejustice.org, there's a list of resources, there's a list of ways that they can get involved, whether they can donate, whether they can volunteer their time, whether they want to just read about things and see graphics that explain statistics and, you know, new ways to reimagine things. I would encourage people to read a lot of books. so many that I'm not going to start just naming them, but I'll definitely like say like read some Patrice Cullors, read some
Yeah.
Angela Davis, and definitely read some Bell Hooks. Like, you know, I'm sure everyone knows that, but people have to be doing that. Like, I'm not gonna just sit here and start going crazy with like author names because that would take a whole episode too. Definitely, I think what people should be aware of is that we're headed into an era of the 70s and no one's sounding the alarm bells on that. And I think
Yeah.
they should be. I've been sounding these alarm bells for like 2 years now. And I knew this would be the move. It's Joe Biden's school of politics. It's the Democrat and Republican people in power right now. All of their school of politics, except for the young QAnoners, which is its own level of
Yeah.
party, in my opinion. Like there's the other neoliberals, the moderates. Neoliberals are now the neocon of '01, which is unbelievable to me. But you know, that's what they be doing, and you know, we need to be paying attention to what they're doing with policies, not just around this, but everything, because they're getting too good at trying to make these things sound good. Like we
Yeah.
shouldn't be looking at a bill from Senator Jackie Irwin in California that is a reformist bill that doesn't actually do anything good for
Yeah.
anybody. It's going to
Yeah.
make very expensive and very long problems with even more supervision, more surveillance, more fees. Just everything's going to get worse. It's essentially like, you know, the 94 crime bill woke edition. That's literally what I call it. Like you
Yeah.
could quote me on that, you could use that. Like, but yeah, Irwin's bill is the 94 crime bill woke edition. Like that's what I call it. But there's a lot of troubling bills that are on assembly this year, and they're very well supported by a lot of Senate, a lot of assembly as well. And even if those members of assembly or subcommittees, like even if they're not in support, even if they don't support them, and they'll try to turn around and look at people like me and call it a win. And we can't let that happen. We have to push harder. We have to actually try to change things. It's like it's time for us to be adults and like politically educate people and like really be able to change things. None of this should be normalized. We should
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
be like, if somebody's main source of news is CNN, that shouldn't be a thing. Like that just should not exist. Like people, I cannot stress enough. Anything I've said, factual as hell for sure. But I shouldn't be your only source of information.
Hmm.
Check out one of my worst enemies. Check out Ben Shapiro. See what he says. Make your decision after that. Like make some choices. I stop just thinking that it's okay to, you know, look at somebody who knows what they're talking about, be like, yeah, that's what it is. Like, no, do your research so that you can be a part of the change too. This is not a spectator sport. This is collective liberation. Boom. I guess that's like one of my little closing statements. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, this shit's unconscionable. We have to change it.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I just wanted to thank you again for coming on the show, and sharing your wealth of knowledge. And hopefully we'll have you back on the show. I'll probably talk to you in like the next 10 minutes. So because we just talk all the time. But yeah, I just want to thank you again. And looking forward to talking to you again right here.
Mad love. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you probably in 10 minutes.
Yeah. All right, man. You hear from me in a second.
All right, love.